Central bankers didn't invent financial warfare. They learned it from a family of wool merchants who used art as their ultimate weapon. While you see beauty, they saw currency. While you see patronage, they saw control. Today, we uncover the playbook that turned the Medici into the gods of banking, using art as their divine instrument. Fail to understand it, and you'll be the first to fall in the next reset. In 1397, Giovanni di Bicci de' Medici founded what would become Europe's most powerful financial empire. The true innovation was not in their ledgers, it was in understanding that wealth without legitimacy is temporary. The Medici's discovery was brutal. Art was the ultimate symbol, not mere decoration, but the documentation of power itself. Like the Athenian silver mines that funded democracy's wars, the Medici wool trade generated capital, but their artistic patronage generated something far more valuable: the appearance of sanctity. They understood what the Peloponnesian War had taught the Greeks 24 centuries earlier. When Athens debased their currency to fund military ambitions, they lost both silver and empire. The Medici learned this lesson in reverse. Their double-entry bookkeeping system was revolutionary, not because it tracked transactions, but because it could hide them. Every florin spent on Botticelli's brush was an investment in reputation laundering. Every chapel they funded was a deposit in the bank of public trust. The Vatican became their most profitable client because the Church's moral authority could baptize any transaction, no matter how questionable its origin. By 1430, the Medici Bank operated across Europe with branches in London, Lyon, Geneva, and Bruges. These were not financial outposts. They were cultural embassies where Florentine art carried Medici messages to foreign courts. A painting was a diplomatic note. A sculpture was a statement of intent. The medium was the message, and it was brutally simple. To resist Medici influence was to resist the will of God himself. The genius was not in the money they moved, but in the narrative they constructed around that money. While competitors focused on interest rates and trade routes, the Medici invested in something that could not be quantified on any ledger: the collective imagination of Europe's elite. Every commissioned work became a prayer in their cathedral of commerce, every artist a priest consecrating their wealth. Giovanni's intuition about art as soft power was weaponized by his successor. Under Cosimo the Elder, it became an industrial complex for manufacturing influence. The Medici ruled Florence not through military conquest, but through cultural conquest. The mechanism was invisible. Cosimo commissioned artists to embed coded messages in their work. Art historians now theorize that Botticelli's Primavera was not a celebration of spring, but diplomatic correspondence painted in symbols only the initiated could read. The placement of figures, the choice of colors, even the direction of a gaze carried intelligence between Medici agents across Italian city-states. Like the Abbasid Caliphate's use of trade routes to spread both goods and ideology in the 9th century, the Medici transformed art into an information network. Their artists were operatives. Their workshops were intelligence headquarters. Every apprentice who learned from a Medici-funded master carried their aesthetic DNA to new territories. The genius lay in plausible deniability. When enemies accused the Medici of manipulation, they pointed to their patronage of sacred art, their funding of religious architecture, their support for scholarly translation. How could such piety be questioned? How could such beauty be evil? The art itself became their character witness. But the true masterstroke was capturing the Vatican's financial operations. When Giovanni di Lorenzo de' Medici became Pope Leo X in 1513, the line between banking and blessing disappeared entirely. Church commissions flowed through Medici accounts. Papal indulgences were processed through Medici branches. The sale of salvation itself was monetized through their network, and every transaction was sanctified by artistic documentation that made the profane appear sacred. The system had evolved beyond wealth accumulation. It had become a machine for manufacturing consent. Citizens who paid the taxes for these projects felt pride, not resentment. They were tricked into believing Medici beauty was their own civic identity. Today's financial temples look different, but they sing the same hymns. Modern central banks commission architectural monuments, not for beauty, but for awe. The Federal Reserve's marble columns echo the same message as Medici chapels. Question our authority, and you question the divine order itself. Contemporary financial institutions use philanthropy, university endowments, and cultural sponsorship to transform wealth extraction into social virtue. The names on museum wings are not donors, but purchasers of moral absolution. Every foundation grant is a down payment on historical amnesia. The Asian financial crisis of 1997 revealed how quickly this facade collapses when the underlying structure fails. Thai billionaires who had seemed permanently powerful through cultural patronage watched their art collections liquidated as their currencies evaporated. The Medici understood this vulnerability. They never relied solely on financial instruments, but always backed their wealth with cultural authority that could survive temporary monetary shocks. Modern art markets function as high-end money laundering, with the same elegant deniability the Medici perfected. When oligarchs purchase paintings for hundreds of millions, they are not buying canvas and pigment. They are buying portable sovereignty, assets that exist beyond the reach of any single nation's tax authority. Like the Medici florin, art transcends borders and outlasts governments. The most chilling parallel is how both eras use beauty to disguise surveillance. Medici artists were informants, reporting on the private lives and political opinions of their subjects during portrait sessions. Today's social media platforms use aesthetic interfaces to extract behavioral data with the same psychological manipulation, making users complicit in their own monitoring through the promise of artistic self-expression. And when the system cracks, as in Rome when currency debasement destroyed trust, people instinctively seek forms of value that exist independent of institutional narrative control. Hard assets that no empire can seize. Winners in the Medici era understood that power flows not from accumulation, but from perception management. The Medici never forgot they were merchants, but they never allowed anyone else to remember it. Their survival depended on constantly elevating their image above their actions. Those who thrived during Medici rule learned to read the symbolic language governing real financial flows. They understood that a patron's choice of artistic themes revealed political alignments, that the prominence of family crests in religious paintings indicated the current hierarchy of influence, that invitations to private art viewings were actually intelligence briefings disguised as cultural events. The catastrophic failure came with Lorenzo the Magnificent. His humanistic education proved a fatal flaw. Cultural sophistication without financial discipline is a luxury the first generation earns and the third generation destroys. His own diary contained the warning that would define their downfall. One cannot live in wealth in Florence without controlling the state. He had learned to manipulate the system, but forgotten how to sustain it. The Medici Bank began failing in 1494, not from external attack, but from internal rot. Lorenzo had spent decades commissioning masterpieces while neglecting the accounting fundamentals his grandfather had perfected. The art remained beautiful, but the ledgers told a darker story. The final lesson emerged during Savonarola's Bonfire of the Vanities in 1497, when popular revolt turned the Medici greatest weapon against them. The art that had legitimized their power became evidence of their corruption. The beauty that had distracted from manipulation became fuel for revolutionary fires. Priceless works burned in Florence's public squares while crowds cheered. Those who had invested everything in reputation management discovered that reputations are always more fragile than the gold they replace. Modern survivors understand that true wealth preservation requires assets existing independent of any cultural narrative. Those who survived were the ones who understood that true wealth begins with control, not of markets, but of custody. The Medici Empire fell not because they lacked gold, but because they had built their throne on shifting sands of public opinion. Their art-backed currency was only as strong as society's willingness to believe in its beauty. When that belief cracked, everything crumbled with mathematical precision. History teaches us that every system of power eventually faces its Savonarola moment, when the manipulated masses recognize the mechanisms of their manipulation. The Medici cultural authority could not survive the Bonfire any more than Rome's silver denarius could survive systematic debasement, or the Abbasid Caliphate trade dominance could survive political fragmentation. The modern financial system faces the same existential vulnerability. Central banks may commission impressive buildings and sponsor prestigious institutions, but their authority rests on collective faith in their legitimacy. When that faith breaks, no amount of cultural investment can restore it. The art burns first. The banks burn second. Today's awakening differs from Florence in one crucial aspect. The alternative no longer requires revolution, but simply requires individuals to claim custody of their own value. Where Savonarola offered only destruction, mathematics offers construction. Where the bonfire could only burn, code can only build. The lesson is carved into the ruins of every fallen financial empire. When people control the keys to their own wealth, they no longer need gods to validate their worth, and they no longer need bankers to grant them permission to transact. The Medici secret was never art itself, but understanding that power without legitimacy is temporary. Their downfall teaches the eternal lesson: symbols can elevate wealth, but only sovereignty can preserve it. If this analysis opened your perspective, subscribe to the Financial Archive to decode other patterns. The answers are in the past.